Welcome back to The Right Routine. I'm Master Joel, the Reluctant Writer's Accomplice, and today I have a special guest. Here is Ashley Farmer. Ashley, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, hi. I am Ashley Farmer. I'm a writer who lives in Salt Lake City, Utah right now. Write fiction and nonfiction and poetry, and also for my day job, work in art education.
Oh, I didn't know that. How did you get into that?
Yeah, so I work in an art museum, and I when I was in graduate school, I started taking these classes that had to do with art in the community. So working with high school students and giving them cameras and having them write poetry and kind of putting together exhibitions of their work within that class. And it just sort of led me kind of down that road, which is different from, I don't know, at least the kind of writerly academia thing. So yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you said you also write fiction. On your website, I only saw some nonfiction. So tell me more about what you write.
Yeah, so I started off really, I would say, studying poetry and focusing on that primarily in graduate school, and then took classes while I was there in fiction and nonfiction. I was in a program that sort of let you, kind of take whatever you wanted within that program, which I really loved. And so I've written short stories and have a couple of sort of, I don't know, kind of short prose linked kind of collections, less traditional stories. So yeah, so poetry, fiction-ish things, and then nonfiction is what I've been kind of working on most recently.
And I saw that your book, Dear Damage, came out just last year. Is that right?
Yeah, just last year.
That's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah,
Um,
it's exciting.
so yeah, is there anything you want to say about that?
No, just yeah, just I feel really fortunate. It's been just a really nice thing. It was a great press, and it's people have been really lovely about it. So yeah,
Cool.
just
Can you
grateful.
tell me
That's
about
all.
the? I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Can you tell me about the publishing process? How did you get an agent? How did you meet the people at that press? Tell me everything.
Yeah. Well, I haven't done the agent thing, so that is uncharted territory for me. I um had a project I was working on, this collection of essays that are linked, Dear Damage. And it's really about sort of an incident that happened in my family. And through that incident, explores things like trauma and gun violence and um, also California and the American dream. Those sorts of themes, I think, are within it. Anyhow, I'd been working on it for a little while, and Sarabam Books is a press in Louisville, Kentucky that I've really admired and loved throughout the years. And they had a kind of a call for um, manuscripts. They have a couple of contests each year. And I thought that what I wrote might fit what they were looking for. And it was one specifically for writers who had lived in Kentucky or wrote about Kentucky. And I lived a good portion of my life outside of Louisville. And a lot of the book takes place kind of in Kentucky or, you know, yeah, kind of encompasses different places there. So anyhow, I submitted it to that and it just worked out, and I'm super glad. I'm super glad for it. And they've been lovely to work with. So yeah, I don't know anything about the agent thing, but it's interesting to me. I can see that there's a lot of great things about it.
Mhm. That's so cool. And there's a big list of people who published it, awards you got for it. I was very impressed by that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's been a couple of awards that it has been finalist for, or things that it's been nominated for, and it was the winner of that. That was the contest, with their Kentucky authors contest.
Yay.
So yeah, thank you.
So, when did you start writing? What inspired you to become a writer?
I really loved writing as a kid. I was a big reader. I loved reading like young adult novels and books that my parents had around. Was a big fan of like the news at a young age. I don't know. I just kind of loved reading like cereal boxes, whatever. I loved reading as a kid and, kept journals and would write poems and things like that. So I think it's always kind of been part of like my DNA. I think like a lot of writers, I don't know if you are that way as well, but I think a lot of us had an early kind of switch flipped. And then I think I was lucky to have some really great teachers who encouraged me to write and just kind of valued reading and writing in general in this way that I feel really glad about. So in high school, I was on the academic team where we wrote competitive essays, which I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but you'd go to, a different high school gym in Kentucky and sit with like 5 other people and they'd give you a topic and you'd write an essay. So I kind of loved stuff like that. And I went to a summer camp program for kids in the state when I was in high school and got to write and study with some real deal writers for 3 weeks. Then that was a pretty formative experience. So always loved writing, but then just, of course, like in college, kind of took it seriously again, had cool professors, and I just kind of kept taking their classes and applied for MFA programs and did that like 3 times. Started one program that I didn't stick with. And it wasn't funded. It was really expensive. And so I aimed for some other programs where I thought maybe I could get funding, and I just kind of kept trying. And so and then studied with some great people. I went to Syracuse University and had some really great teachers there. So kind of think I've always been a writer, but then, have just had some good fortune to have really cool people who just value words and encourage that kind of self-expression. So very long answer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
How about you? Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah. When did you start writing?
I start writing. So I've been in Mexico for a while, kind of stuck. Um, it's a long story. Like I said, my husband was accused of being deported, which we can prove he was not because I was with him the whole time. But because he was accused and there's no way for us to battle that, we have to go through the very long process of apologizing for having to be deported, which he wasn't. And then we've been waiting for years for everything to get settled.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
that sounds like a pain.
it's been thousands of dollars. It's been years of waiting. It's been a very big pain. But
Yeah.
good thing is I've started writing. I was in Mexico. I didn't have friends. I really had a hard time getting out and doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I turned to reading, and I thought, I read a story, and I thought, oh, I just wish this character could have done this instead. Why are they focusing on this one when they should be looking at this one? I feel like could have fixed some things. And I just rewrote the story, and then I wrote another story and another one.
Oh, that's awesome. The kind of organic, just sort of circumstances and
yeah,
kind of finding love in that, it sounds like.
Yeah. I'm not published. I'm working on a few books, but not published yet.
Yep, matter of time. Just the right moment.
But it's amazing how much I don't know about the writing world. I've listened to a few podcasts, some YouTubers, AuthorTube, I think is what it's called. And there's just so many things going on. I didn't know that there were like literary events that people went to. Events like what you did in high school. That is so cool. An essay writing competition.
Yeah. I really love that about the literary world. I mean, I think that when I talk to other writers about it, you just sort of realize that there's just so much going on. There's so many different like niche sort of groups and people working in different forms and different communities, like different online communities. Depending on genres, like what people are doing. I think it's really exciting. I think that there's something really rich about the fact that there's like, just like you said, I feel like I figure out all the time, like, oh, I didn't know that those kinds of events go on, or I didn't know that, people who write like YA, like mysteries and horror and that stuff. For there's like a communities around that, and people who like know each other and support each other. And anyhow, I don't know, I like that about writers, and I like that there's just a lot of diversity in that way.
Mhm.
Different little bubbles and things going on.
So, have you ever gone to literary events like that? Do you have a writing group? How do you I don't know, take part in this big world of writing?
Yeah, so I did, as I mentioned, I did that MFA program at Syracuse, and that was really great. I think there's so many different ways to be a writer. That worked for me really well because I think um, just for my own personal kind of growth in that time in my life, it was really great to kind of move across the country and to learn some discipline around writing and to kind of just be in a different place on my own and meeting new people. And I'm still connected to several of those people and can share work with them, or at least kind of see what they're doing and find inspiration from them. Um, I sometimes go to annual events like AWP is really fun.
What does that stand for?
So it's I'm going to get this wrong, Association of Writers and Writing Programs, I think.
Oh,
Oh, might have to double check that. But
I'll
anyhow,
double
it's
check, and if it's wrong, I'll just Google it.
a thanks. It's a really great conference that's an annual thing. They have a huge book fair. And so it's everything from, you know, big presses with, quote unquote, like big books and that kind of thing. And then small presses and people who are making zines and doing things like that too. So I'll go to that conference some years. I just joined a writing group with some other people who are writing nonfiction to just kind of have some folks to bounce ideas off of once a month and, get inspired by their brilliance. And it's just people I connected with online that I hadn't known before, but kind of through like, I don't know, Instagram and Facebook and that stuff kind of found each other.
Nice.
And then I'm married to a writer, which
Oh,
is super helpful because he will read some of my stuff and vice versa. And, we can like walk the dog and talk about ideas and kick things around. So kind of a little bit of a built-in buddy, I guess, in that sense too.
that's great.
Yeah.
So, when does a book start for you?
Hmm.
When do you start thinking, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I should turn that into a book? Or do you have a notebook with ideas for books? Do you feel it when it's bubbling?
Yeah. I think it's different. I think it's been different with each project. I've done 4 books now, and I think this last one that was about my family, that book Dear Damage, that one I sort of knew, I just knew I was going to write about that and that it would be nonfiction and it would be about my family and it would be about, I didn't know what all the steps would look like or what the different parts would look like, but I just kind of knew like in my bones that I was just going to write that book, and I felt focused there. Um, I think other projects I've just sort of goofed around like with a poem or two or like a story or two and just sort of tried to find my way into something, and for some of those it took a long time. But I think now, because I work like, a job that's like very full time and um try to make try to fit writing in kind of where I can, which that's true for everybody, I think, or a lot of people. I want to be more intentional and kind of focused with a project in mind, almost even before like I hit the page.
Mm.
So maybe that feels a little artificial. I know some people just like to kind of explore and sort of see what happens, but I almost feel like part of me is really practical. So just sort of thinking like, okay, these are some characters. This is an idea I'm interested in. And I'm going to kind of set out and just sort of see this through. Like that's kind of how I'm working right now. Just because
Cool.
there's not a lot of time and I don't want to take too many years trying to figure out the next thing. So yeah.
Do you outline your books?
I'm working on, I haven't before, but I'm working on a novel right now, which I've never done. And so I've outlined that. And I don't think I could be doing it if I hadn't outlined it. I feel like it would be like building a house and then realizing like, oh, all of the bricks like in this one corner, they just like didn't line up. Like you just gotta, raise the whole thing and start over again. And so for me, I've found it super helpful so far. I mean, the proof's in the pudding, I guess, but we'll see how it turns out. Um, but my mind, I think I need that kind of structure to follow. How about you in the projects you're working on? Do you outline? Are you feeling your way through? Like how do you work?
I don't have an established method. I just try a lot of things. I've
Yeah.
written a book by pantsing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I knew what I wanted the beginning to be and what I wanted the end to be, and I forced myself to write it, and I hated
Mhm.
it, but I
Oh,
finished it.
good for you. That's
I know.
great.
I really do like outlining though. It just I rarely stick to the outline, I
Yeah.
find, but it's nice to have it so when I'm not sure what to do next, I can just follow what's written and move on to the next part. That's exciting.
Yeah. And I feel like revision, you know, there's just every sort of possibility there.
Mhm.
I love that part of the process. I don't know how you feel about that, but I love going back in. Like that feels fun and like juicy to me. Like, ooh, like I'm gonna work with the language now and like really try to just envision this more clearly and make my senses, give them a little more momentum or juice. Like I love that part. So um I could just like nerd out on that, I think, and not have a story if I didn't have an outline. So those aesthetic things, you can focus on them, but there's something underneath it. I don't know. That's how my brain
Yeah,
works.
the first draft isn't nearly as fun as the other ones,
Yeah, it's totally overrated.
but it has to exist to do the rest of
Yeah,
it.
it's true. It's true. You can't get to the other ones without them.
No.
I used to teach, and sometimes I still do teach students sometimes. Uh, and I think a lot of times students really love first draft, like the exploratory stuff, just sort of, like getting, in my experience at least, it's been a while now since I've been teaching, but um and I think I used to be that way, but now I definitely I like that editing process, the refining process much, much more.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How do you write your books? Do you type them out, dictate, write by hand?
I type them out. I just keep like a Word doc open. Right now I'm kind of keeping a spreadsheet to just like kind of track my word counts each day just for fun, just to like kind of be a geek about stats. But yeah, yeah, a single doc and yeah.
Nice. With my other books, I was taking a business class, so
Mhm.
I was learning about Excel and I was writing
Mhm.
books, so I would track the word counts each day and I had graphs and pie charts.
Ooh, that's good.
It's very satisfying.
My tracking has not evolved to the pie chart level yet, but I can see the satisfaction in that.
Oh, just like incomplete and complete, guessing how many words I was gonna have based on
Yeah.
how many I had written. Just
Oh, that's cool.
it's nerdy, but
I love
satisfying.
it. That stuff's fun. And part of the process. I mean, it's kind of cool to have like a map of your process or a record of it, I guess.
I agree, 100%. I'm glad I'm not the only nerd about that.
Yeah. This is my first time and I love like there's something really fun about typing those numbers in each day. So yeah. Mhm.
So, do you write every day or a few times a week? What does it look like when you decide, okay, it's writing time? Do you have a set time whenever you get a minute or two?
Yeah, I try to be pretty consistent about getting up in the morning and doing it before I go to work. I don't have a job that's like totally 9 to 5, but many days of the week I'm there. And so before, you know, I'll wake up, have a little bit of coffee, and then try to get maybe, like about 500 words a day is what I'm aiming toward. And that's imperfect. There's just some days I don't hit that, but that's it. I feel happy if I touch it every day, if I make something new happen with it each day. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. It's great. I do not have the discipline to get up in the mornings to write. I tried.
Yeah, I'm still trying to find that perfect, like the perfect time. I know some people, I think I used to be more of a night owl and that was my good kind of window, but I feel like now by the end of the day, um, the creative kind of gears aren't turning as much as they are in the morning when I'm up and kind of a little bit fresher before I've done other things. So yeah. When do you write?
I have a dictation
Oh,
device, a little recorder, and I put it in my
cool.
pocket when we go on walks.
Oh, nice.
It works.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. Can I ask what dictation software you use?
I don't have a software. I've used Dragon in the past, and that was
Okay.
great. But I had to open my computer, turn it on, put in the
Yeah.
password, open the thing, and I don't have patience for that. So I literally just have this little recording device. I don't even have the cord to connect it to my computer anymore. I got it in high school.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, to record my music lessons, and I still have it. Um, but I've I've dictated a few children's books, haven't done anything with them yet. And then I just recently finished a novel, and I'm going through again and just it's amazing. I've never done this before. I'm doing the second draft by just dictating it again, how I remember it, and I'm fixing so many things. Every scene is different from how it was in the first draft, and it's
Oh,
so
wow.
much better, so much juicier.
That's
Even though
awesome that you're doing that. Are you re-listening?
no,
So you're just kind of going back through as you understand the story and
yeah,
interesting.
I was not expecting that, but it's nice.
That's really cool. I love learning about people's processes. I think it's just really interesting how we discover those things that work for us, probably partly by necessity and, like the time that we have to get that done and everything. And
And
yeah,
I
that's
think
just, I've never heard of someone working quite like that. That's really cool.
I, I have two babies.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot I can do about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's right.
I
That's
think
right.
it's
We
funny
just
how
all find a way.
mhm. And times change. You know, the
Hmm.
same person can do something one year but have to change it the next. You know,
Yeah.
so you know. And I guess I started this podcast because I know so many excellent writers, incredible storytellers, but they don't sit down and write because they're so busy and they don't think that they can sit down and type it out. But there are other ways to write a book, you know.
Hmm.
And so that's why I'm doing this podcast, is to talk
That's
to
great.
authors like you and see, okay, what are the tricks, what are the options here that people just haven't thought of yet, you know.
Yeah. That's great. Have you talked to people with other interesting, um, like techniques?
um I have only, you are the third author.
Oh,
I have well, technically the fourth, but one of them was my brother, so I'm not going to count him.
that's cool.
You're the third stranger author, new friend that I've made.
Yeah.
And one of them, his name is Sean Prentice. He's the first one that
Oh,
I
yeah.
and have you heard of him?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked him.
That's
He
great.
he only writes like 2 or 3 times a week,
Mm.
20 minutes, prioritizing the time that he has with his daughter while she's growing up, which I thought was cool. I thought,
Yeah.
I had the idea that you have to write every day. So many people say write every day, but he doesn't. Oh,
Mm-mm.
okay. And then I talked to no, you're Ashley. I talked to Allison Hymas, and she has kids too, little kids. And so she has to carve out really small increments of time and coordinate with her husband during
Mhm.
nap times and bedtimes. So I don't know, everyone's different and it's
Yeah. Yeah. I love thinking about that and hearing about different people's approaches. I know there's someone that I just kind of know through social media who's talked about writing whole books like on the notes app on public transportation, just like, and I thought, oh, that's such an interesting technique. There's actually a couple people I think I know of that have written that way. Um, yeah, people that use dictation. I don't know. It's all really interesting to kind of peek inside other people's approaches.
mm, well, it's funny. I was watching, well, my mom was watching a show and I walked in and I saw um, it was about the Bronte sisters and they were sending in a manuscript and it was all handwritten. And I thought, oh my goodness, we have so many options now. We don't have to handwrite every draft. You can dictate it. You can literally record your voice telling yourself a story. You can type it
Yeah,
out. You can have the computer type it out while you say it. You know, so many options.
yeah,
You don't have to
I
just sit
know.
and write anymore.
I have to say, I feel like handwriting would be like my least appealing option too.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm slow. I don't think I wouldn't have I wouldn't have done so well back in the Brontes era. But I used to when I lived in LA and I would be in traffic a lot. I was just like commuting a lot for work. And I used Dragon a little bit then. I'm kind of forgetting about it because it's been a long time, but just I wouldn't like tell whole stories, but I'd at least like capture images and things from just being on the freeway, like ideas that were kind of percolating. And that's really nice to be able to capture something so quickly without having to be in a specific place with certain materials and, setting aside time like that. You
Yeah.
can be sure you don't lose some of those, I think, fleeting ideas or images that strike you. That's really nice that we have those tools for that reason.
So you've moved because you're in Utah, you were in California, you were in, was it Kentucky or Alabama?
Kentucky. Mhm.
How has moving around so much influenced your writing and your stories?
I think it's played a big part in my writing. It's really part of how I think about the world. I think a lot about the environment that I'm in and the different places I've been tethered to and am no longer tied to. So um, this last book I wrote quite a bit about California because I was born there and moved away when I was a baby, but then moved back as an adult. And my mom had been born there, and my grandma and my great grandma, and so place was a big part of that book. And I think my experience of being in grad school in upstate New York, where you just get this just wild, huge amounts of snow, um, like that landscape and the way it can change so dramatically is just like kind of imprinted and will show up in stories and things. I have family in Nevada, and I think the desert is really interesting. I lived there as a kid. There's like a lot of mystery and just surprise in all of that vastness that is interesting to me. Um, and then, living in Utah, I've been here 7 years now, and it's a place I really love, and it feels like home now. I think we'll probably live here for quite a while, but I also feel curious about it still because I'm not like a Utahn by birth. Like a lot of people who are here have these kind of generational ties, so I feel like I'm always kind of looking a little bit with curiosity at things, both in terms of like the landscape, which is really just striking and dramatic, and depending on where you are, just like, I don't know, the Great Salt Lake is really interesting and strange, and the West Desert and just different places, just really super cool. And also just culturally and socially, I kind of, you know, sort of look around and I learn new things all the time about this place. And so I love that. Like I think having moved and moving has um, kind of, yeah, shaped my perspective. And I think it makes me just kind of maybe just observant as I've tried to kind of fit into different places in a way that you maybe don't have to when you've lived somewhere your whole life, you know? So anyhow, I finally stopped calling myself new to Utah, but it took like 6 years. I told a coworker, I was like, I think I need to drop that. And she was like, yeah, I don't think you're new anymore, actually. You know, it's like, it's been 7 years. So yeah.
And have you been in Salt Lake City this whole
Mhm.
time?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good.
We'd never visited and we came here for jobs. So it's been this like wonderful surprise and just a really, really good to us.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
What has been the biggest difficulty in your writing career that you've overcome? Or, I don't know, the hardest part of your life when you used writing to get through it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think with writing as a process in general or practice, I think sometimes the hardest thing has just been me being my own kind of worst enemy. And I think that that takes the form of like comparing my work to others or feeling like what I care about and want to write about is like not as maybe important as something else, or just that kind of personal sort of ways that we can be unkind, I think, to ourselves or critical or judgmental. So those are things that I think over time I've gotten to be more accepting of, like, this is the kind of writer that I am. And like comparisons are never, there's nothing ever fruitful in that. It's not useful. um and just to kind of have goals but fewer expectations, I think, if that makes sense. Like, it's fun to make things, I think, with this intention that maybe they'll be out there in the world, but to maybe not feel so much pressure, or to just not let your aims kind of take the fun out of what it is that you're doing. So I think those are all just sort of personal things that are connected to creativity and that creative process that are hurdles probably we all deal with, and that maybe they've just gotten easier with time, I think. And then I guess I would say, I wrote about, as I mentioned in that collection, Dear Damage, about this kind of this incident of violence in my family, and this sort of um, this this event that was also public, like it was in the news for a little bit. And it was, I mean, it was pretty traumatic, and I write about that in the book. And I think that I really was scared to do that because I sort of feared people's judgments. I really worried that I would get it wrong in non and and I felt a responsibility in nonfiction to, I wanted to tell the story like accurately and well, and I wanted to do right by my family, and I wanted like to not mess anything up because it felt personally important, much more so than, I don't know, like, a story about a woman who turns into a coyote. Like, I might have fun writing that, and that's like personal in its own way to me, but lower stakes it felt to me than in writing this. So I think that was a challenge too, just feeling the sort of pressure to get it right. But then finding on the other side of that people, um, my family felt good about the book, as far as they've all told me, and people have generally been kind about it. And anyhow, those kind of worst case scenario things I imagined didn't, ever really come to pass. So
Well, that's
kind
good.
of kind of all over with that answer, but I think some hurdles are personal, and then, personality specific, and then others are maybe like project specific. But
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah.
How, with project specific, difficulties. How do you respond when you hit a writer's block?
Mm. Um, I think now I just almost try to ignore it. I try to just do something else, and even in spite of it. Like I try to just like there's spots in this novel thing that I'm working on where I do sort of hit a writer's block and I feel like, oh, I don't really know what to do with this part. So I'm just gonna just do something else instead, just like go to the next chapter, go to the next part of things. So I guess I try not to give it too much attention and just sort of understand that like hiccups or confusions or questions just are part of the process. And I think the other thing that's super helpful to me, I always like to have more than one project going on. So you can
Okay.
always like scoot over to the other one if this one isn't working out, and then you got another one you can scoot over to and go back to if this one's not going great. But having something I can kind of bounce between, I think keeps me from just totally losing steam and just letting something go. So um, those things are helpful. And then one of my teachers, Michael Burkhardt, an amazing poet, um, he also told us like to never waste anything, that basically you have ideas or lines or parts of poems or parts of stories, you can use them for something. So like save them, tuck them away, whatever, your process might be. But I think I've sort of taken that approach to what I'm doing too, that like maybe I start something, I really am trying to be a finisher, but if I start something and I really just kind of hit a wall with it, and maybe I'm going to bounce to another project or start something new, I also just kind of keep in mind that I'm not going to completely toss this other thing, that I'll go back to it. Maybe it becomes something different altogether. But I try to kind of be greedy and hang on to those things and find a way to recycle them or repurpose them later. That kind of helps me, I think, move through writer's block too. Because then you have rough stuff you can just go back to and
Yeah.
see, like, oh, yeah, okay, well, that wasn't as bad as I remember it. Or maybe that character is like someone cool that I can do something with, or there's a few good lines in here. So yeah, that's been part of my process too.
That's wonderful. I hadn't had the idea of working on two projects and going back and forth between them. I like that.
Yeah, I think maybe for some people that would not feel focused enough. I know some writers who really kind of advocate for like staying the course on a single thing. But there's a part of me that like, I don't know if I'm feeling sort of like grumpy about it, something I'm working on, or I just kind of want to like, just sort of like at least mentally say, I just, why am I even doing this? So whatever, then I can kind of go to something else and work on it. I almost feel like I'm getting away with something, like, oh, well, I'll go play with this instead. And that is helpful, I think, for maybe my disposition, and maybe just the way the creative process works for me. Because sometimes stepping away too for a little bit, you go back to something and I don't know, you've got like a new perspective on it. You kind of have fresh eyes. You can sort of see a problem or how to fix, like you see a solution maybe that you couldn't see before. So yeah.
Mhm. And I think you gain experience as you write other things.
Yeah, that's true too.
When you knew there was an issue, you didn't know what it was, it just felt wrong. Later you come back and you know, oh, the character's wrong. Oh, the stakes are wrong. You can fix it.
Yeah, I think that what you just said is like such a big part of it. You start to really know what kind of like what your values are, what you know how to do really well, what you care about in your own work, and you get it gets to be a quicker sort of solution process because you even know what to go back and kind of focus on in those ways that you're talking about. Yeah, I think that's such a big part of it, that experience you gain over time.
But still, it's so much more fun to play with a work that's already written, that you've already vomited out. No matter how messy it is, there's always salvageable pieces.
Yeah, yeah, that's totally true. You just have to go through that whole kind of rough, like the murky, rocky waters first.
Yep. Um, question for you about your students and the people you've taught.
Mhm.
What is the biggest question or concern that they have with regards to writing or creating in general? And what is your answer for them?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think.
Mhm.
It's been a little while since I've taught, but I think something that I see in student work, I think sometimes maybe they underestimate the value of their own personal lived ordinary experiences that could really inform super cool creative work. So sometimes I see students maybe reach and stretch to portray something that they maybe don't know as much about and have to really like maybe research or like really, really imagine. And I think sometimes like, oh, what you just told me about like where you lived or like where you come from, or, sometimes I think whether it's fictionalized or in nonfiction, I think a lot of ordinary everyday experiences can resonate just incredibly on the page. And especially I think for writers who are figuring out what kind of writers they are, like there's all of this really rich fodder right there worth exploring. And sometimes I don't know that students trust that what's ordinary to them would be interesting to somebody else. So that's not really a question they come to me with, but I think I just see like, oh, there's, you just have these some fascinating like experiences and perspectives that could be, you know, explored or utilized in cool ways that, but but students also have to figure out what's interesting to them too. And that's part of the process. I mean,
How has your reading influenced what you write and how you write it?
well, I think one thing I really appreciated about the the education I've been super fortunate to have is, simply people kind of turning me on to writers I might not have found on my own, and also helping me maybe learn to read a little more critically or with an eye toward things I might have missed on my own. And I don't mean that even in an academic way or anything, but just sort of how to slow down and maybe take in a poem, like a single poem, in a way that, I might have sped through on the page on my own. So learning to read differently and a little more widely um, has influenced my work. I think poets and poetry will always influence what I write, including nonfiction and fiction, just because I love language and sound, and I love what poets do with that. So I feel like, um, and that's also part of the fun for me in creation and in that revision process we're talking about. It's like the rhythm and the sonic stuff that happens, and just like fundamental wordplay. So people who have fun with words on that elemental level, like poets do, have influenced my work a lot. And then I think there's just a lot of women writers that I've been inspired by too, who, um, you know, have tackled subject matter in these really bold and interesting ways that um, have kind of made me feel like I can tackle certain topics too, and write about certain experiences that are particular to like womanhood and girlhood and maybe wouldn't have seemed serious to me enough when I was younger, or I wouldn't have felt like brave enough to write about, I guess. So some things are, I think form wise are super interesting to me. And then in some cases too, there's just people who can speak to experiences that resonate with me. And I think, ooh, like you did that and you said that. And that makes me feel like I want to do and say things about some of this stuff too. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I have learned a lot from this, and I really appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks for having me. It's so nice to meet you and to spend time talking to you. Thank you so much. And what a great series you're working on. I'm going to be excited to tune into more of these and see what writers have to say and the great questions you ask. Really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Where can our audience find you? And can you tell us a bit about your latest book, where they can get that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm at Ashley M for Marie, ashleymfarmer.com. And the most recent book is Dear Damage, and you can find that at Bookshop or on my website or any of those places. So yeah, thank you.
And do you have an Instagram?
Oh yes, yeah, AM Farmer on Instagram and Twitter and all those places. Yep.
Okay. I will have a link to her website and your books below.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again.
Yeah, thanks for your time. So good to meet you and spend time with you.
It's been great to meet you too. Yeah. See you later, guys.